There are definitely a lot of entertainers out there, even comic book creators out there, that will cry harassment when they're just getting feedback. But every once in a while, people really start crossing the line and going way overboard in response to a comic book or a movie. And that certainly has happened this week to one Tim Seeley in response to his Age of Revelation Infinity comic book #4 portrayal of Magik. There certainly was an outcry from a lot of people that I think just saw screenshots but decided to jump on the bandwagon and decry sexism and misogynism and all kinds of other things at Mr. Seeley. And I don't believe that they are warranted. Now, before we get into all these details, quick shout out to the 616 Comics, the #1 producer retailer in the entire industry. If you go to their website, there's a discount code in the video description. You can use it there. 10% off their exclusive cup. Now let's talk about what's happening to Tim Seeley and why he's walking away from the Twitter sphere. The release of X-Men Age of Revelation Infinity comic #4 has provoked substantial backlash from fans, including allegations of fetishizing childhood abuse and employing sexist tropes. Tim Seeley was hit with messages like, "fuck you" in particular, calling yourself a pro-feminist, pro-sex creator, while writing the abysmal dogshit comic on Magik. Go absolutely fuck yourself, you rape fetish having Gatorade body built bitch. And, hey Tom Brevoort and Tim Seeley, fuck you for that Magik issue. Actually fucking disgusting, Tom, that you would greenlight this shit. And deplorable, Tim, that you'd even think about writing it. Feminist my ass. It's clear you only see women as objects for your own fantasies. On top of that, several verifiable death threats were sent his way in response to the comic book. And yes, I believe this has gone too far. And there are a couple of articles out there, I believe one from Bleeding Cool, and there's another one from The Gamer, maybe something like that. And they're definitely beating around the bush, trying to make excuses for these people and their insane reaction to a comic book. But you all are insane. This type of reaction to this comic book is well over the top. It is not warranted. And you need to look in the mirror if you decided to go on to social media and have that kind of response. There's appropriate reactions where you actually criticize the book and say, hey, this is where you got it wrong. And then there's that when you're going way over the line with death threats. I completely understand having emotional reactions to what happens to characters in comic books. I have a comic book channel. I've been talking about this stuff for 8 years, and you do get emotionally invested in the stories. But there is a line that you don't cross. And some of those are going out there, never mentioning any specifics, just telling people to go F themselves, and certainly with the death threats. I don't blame Tim Seeley for any of these reactions. I don't think any of this is his fault, although some of this does trace back to a project he was scheduled to work on several years ago. He was supposed to introduce the daughter of Blade, but he wasn't able to do it because he was a white writer, and people found out if you go out there and you say misogyny, if you say sexist, if you say transphobe, if you say racist, you could affect change in the comic book industry, whether you have a valid point or not. And these emotionally charged arguments would get you a response and a result in the comic book industry. And I think over the years, Marvel placating to these internet mobs and giving into them and placating them has taught them that this is the kind of language that you use when you don't like a story. And I completely blame people like Tom Brevoort and Cebulski and Axel Alonso and a lot of the Marvel brain trust along the way that engaged with these types of arguments as if they were valid. I am a YouTuber myself. I do have to deal with a bit of harassment and name calling, and certainly some gross comments showing up on my videos. And the only way to deal with this stuff is complete silence. You never even act like they exist. If you do want to acknowledge them, you only admonish them for going so far over the line. Unfortunately, not only in comic books, but certainly in entertainment, people have been taught this is how you respond to things that you don't particularly appreciate. The harassment ultimately pushed Seeley off of Twitter. He deactivated his account, locked down his Instagram, and moved to Blue Sky. There, he said people were still talking about the comic, but the threats weren't following him. Explaining why he left Twitter entirely, Seeley wrote, "Well, I had to finally deactivate Twitter because that was a touch too much death for me and the family. It was a shit 16-year run. Fuck everybody." Not exactly taking the high road on that one, but I don't particularly blame Tim Seeley for having that response. I don't believe he'll find greener pastures over on Blue Sky. It feels like that might be even more unhinged than Twitter these days. But social media, is a bit of a shitstorm. And Tim Seeley is not the only creator that I personally know that has stepped away from Twitter, and the piling on and the dragging people is almost like a sport in social media. And it's pretty gross. And that kind of harassment was completely unwarranted, unhinged, and undeserved, in my opinion. And I don't blame Seeley and other creators for walking away. There is no place in the comic book fandom for any of these types of reactions, and I condemn them wholeheartedly. I don't support any of this stuff. Whether you thought the book was good or not, that is not how you respond to that. Now let's talk a little bit about the story in question. The issue itself follows Doug Ramsey, now Revelation, manipulating Cyclops into a mission to rescue Fabian Cortez from S.H.I.E.L.D. The mission ends with Maria Hill dead and Ileana being fatally shot by Nick Fury under Cortez's influence. After her death, her soul returns to Limbo, where she respawns in her underwear while demons make crude comments about her body, and she's forced back into the Darkchild persona. A controversial panel shows Darkchild thanking her abusers for sating her pathetic needs, which some readers interpreted as implying sexual assault, though that is a wildly misguided interpretation. The issue ends with Ileana breaking free once again and setting her sights on Cyclops, who she blames for the chain of events. Now, the controversial panel where she certainly is in a suggestive pose and says, "Thank you for sating her pathetic needs," there's a big-ass turkey leg right in front of her, and she's clearly talking about feeding her. It wasn't talking about sexual abuse or anything like that. Now, I will criticize Tim Seeley for this story for basically just doing a retread of what's already happened to Magik in the past as far as Ileana and what she went through when she was kidnapped and stuck in limbo and all the things that happened to her there. He just went and did it again so he could pop her out the backside only as Darkchild with a vendetta against Cyclops, who's trying to stop the Age of Revelation. So I don't think it's original storytelling. It's probably not even good storytelling. And I understand the criticism or feedback that, hey, this character already overcame all of these issues and is now a better character. Let's move on past that. Let's not rewind the clock and keep replaying the same events over and over. And I will justifiably criticize Marvel Comics as a whole with the Magik character that they basically just continuously send her back to limbo because they never let the character really move on from that. But I don't think that's specifically a Tim Seeley problem. I think that's a Marvel Comics problem. And it sounds like because Tim Seeley was working on an Infinity comic book, he didn't put much thought or effort into it and just redid her story again. Not exactly interesting, and I certainly think it's probably warranted to criticize that, but you can actually point out what you don't like and say, hey, this is why it's not good. You don't have to just go over the top emotional, go F yourself, go F your family. Obviously, the threats of physical harm and all that kind of stuff were absolutely disgusting, but I do think this is a comic book that probably rightly deserves to be criticized because it wasn't original. But then again, it's an Infinity comic book. It's not really important. If it was important, it wouldn't be an Infinity comic. And it's just telling you how she became Darkchild 24/7 and how Ileana Rasputin really isn't there anymore as she's taken over, I guess, the city of Providence, Rhode Island within the Revelation territories. And I don't think Tim Seeley is above criticism or negative feedback because he probably deserves it for this comic book. But I think the negative feedback that caused him to leave Twitter was 100% unjustifiable, disgusting, abhorrent behavior. And I am not Rich Johnston from Bleeding Cool, whoever read that The Gamer article. It was wrong. If you'd like some more information about the Blade comic book that I did mention earlier, which did tell fans, or some crazy fans, that if you use this kind of language, you can affect change, where they got Tim Seeley and an artist removed from a Blade comic book because they were the wrong skin color. If you're not familiar with that, I do have this video right here talking about the introduction of Blade's daughter and how it's supposed to happen 6 years earlier under Tim Seeley. I do appreciate the time, and keep thinking critical.